back to Live at 9. We're back with a familiar face, Brooks Fortenberry with Performance Therapy. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you.
We're talking about some misconceptions, because sometimes people have this preconceived notion or idea when it comes to physical therapy. And tell me about some of those.
The main one that we hear all the time, I get so many people that come in and I can just see the look on their face about being nervous about their pain. You know, like so many things are painful that you think of with physical therapy, of like, oh, I had a friend that had knee surgery and she was hurting the whole time, and they just have this conception that we're going to hurt them, and that, or they hear the common thing of no pain, no gain, and think that that's going to apply. And I always tell people all the time, I was like, that's not true. It's like, we're trying to avoid pain. If we're doing something that increases your pain, we're probably doing the wrong thing. Now, for some people, if you have a knee replacement, there's an expectation that some of the therapies can be uncomfortable and painful, trying to regain that range of motion, but that's kind of contained to that and some of the rotator cuff surgeries where we have to regain that range of motion. There can be some uncomfortable moments of therapy, but not the whole thing. And certainly not the patients that are coming in for back or neck pain, where everything they do, every twist and turn they do is painful. We want to find the stuff that they can do that doesn't hurt, that's beneficial for them. Focus on that, and typically kind of that range of motion that they can work in that's painful initially will get a little bit better and better by time. But I have people all the time saying, oh, I just know it's going to hurt. I know it's going to hurt. Physical torture is pain and torture. I was like, no, it's like we're trying to live away from that and build your tolerance to those movements, you know. Yeah, you're trying to get them more comfortable, strengthened in those areas that they may be a little bit weaker. And like you said, I think the word uncomfortable may be better than painful. Do you find that people totally avoid it for a long time because they think it's going to be so painful? Yeah, that can be the case of they just think of well, I do these little movements at home and it's painful. I just know if I go to PT, it's that. And I'll have some patients sometimes that are 5 or 6 visits in, and they'll have a really bad day where they're hurting bad, and they'll call and cancel. And I tell them, look, that you take your car into the shop when it's hurting and it's worse. Come in, because they have this picture of, if we're doing a lot of exercises, they have this picture of oh, I can't do that. But on those painful days, we'll pull back on those exercises, maybe spend a little bit more time with massage and some manual treatments. And just kind of, therapy should always kind of be fluid to their symptoms, you know. It doesn't always have to be aggressive strengthening all the time. Well, that's why y'all are the professionals. Like you said, you're going to mold it to whatever your patient is thinking or feeling that day. So if they're saying, I've had a really rough week, you're not going to go all the way up on the scale of things, to make it painful. We base it off their activity levels from that week, too. Of I have some patients that have had maybe a work injury or an injury that's kept them out of work. What treatment looks like when they're at home and not doing anything, I can kind of get away with doing a little bit more versus their first day back at work and they're on their feet 8 hours, or they're picking up and carrying things. When they come and do therapy that afternoon, we're going to adjust, because I don't need to do 100 more squats when you've already squatted 100 times at work. So we focus more on those kind of recovery kind of things. So it's always should be kind of fluid to what the patient needs and their activity level and what's creating that pain. And what about people that think, I don't need to go somewhere to get physical therapy. I can just do it myself. Do you ever hear that? I hear it a lot, and sometimes I see patients for a one-time visit. Sometimes the doctor will send them and say, show them some exercises, which can be beneficial, but it also, I'm giving them exercises that are what they need for that moment in time. If they're weak at that time, I'm giving them really easy exercises they can do. Well, 2 weeks later, they may be at a higher level and can do more aggressive things. I like that follow-up, because what you look like and what you need that first day may not be what you look like 2 weeks from now when you've already started to improve and build that strength. So it always, like we talked about, a fluid of progression of a lot of times with my back pain patients, our knee patients, early on we spend a lot of time on the mat doing simple exercises, but we don't live on a mat or a bed. We're up and going and doing it. And our athletes, they start out after surgery on that mat a lot more time than standing, but it should kind of progress over time to where we're more time standing, less time on the mat. So if I'm giving them exercises for that first day, that's not what it looks like a month later. That's really a good point, like you said. Now, if you want to get to the point in your, your progress where you're just feeling okay, then that's fine, but you want to get them to even better, even stronger. So that's why you've really got to tailor it, the more you see them, the more progressive those treatments will get. And I have to test them similarly to what they had that brought them into therapy. If I'm doing easy exercises and they're mastering those, but I'm doing them a disservice if it's not similar to what's creating that pain. It could be similar to getting in the yard and being up and down off that. It could be an athlete running around. It doesn't have to be that. That's a common misconception too, is that we're mainly focusing on athletes and running, and the active population is no, so many of my patients are having trouble doing simple things at home, having pain with just sitting in a chair 4 hours at work. We see people of all different activity levels.
I can imagine too, like if someone has a similar injury to say their friend or their coworker who may be 20 or 30 years younger, they think that this is going to look the exact same for me, but I'm sure it doesn't.
That happens so much of people saying, you know, I had a friend that had a knee surgery and she went through it, or I had a friend with a shoulder surgery and they were better by now. It's like none of those surgeries are the same. The injuries aren't the same.
Right.
Where they injured it may not have been the same in that shoulder, and they may have had a completely different surgery. But sometimes people will say, you know, my buddy had that knee surgery.
Right.
A completely different knee surgery. It could be a replacement compared to an ACL or a meniscus repair. It's like, comparison is the thief of joy. That's in life, you know.
Yes, that is definitely
But I always tell everybody, let's just focus on what we have going on. I get knee replacement patients that compare themselves to the other patients. It's like, no, let's just focus on our game and get it where we need to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are really, really good tips there, and I think something that everyone needs to hear. So thanks for coming on this morning to give us some of those misconceptions. Hopefully we can change people's mind when it comes to physical therapy. Thanks so much, Brooks.